that, let's kick it off. Let's kick off our ransomware EcoCast here. I'd like to introduce the CEO of Infrascale, Mr. Ken Shaw. Are you there, Ken?
Yes, David. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. You want to throw me screen controls and we can get the show on the road?
Yes, sir. There we go.
All right. Let's see if I can get this right the first time. Ken,
Awesome.
you see my screen?
I do see your screen. Take it away, Ken.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending upon where in the world you're joining us from. I'm here in sunny California, and today we are talking about how to prepare, protect, and recover from ransomware. Just want to thank Actual Tape Media for putting this event on. We're thrilled to be here. What I'm going to talk about looks a little bit... Oh, hang on. Before I get to my agenda, let me tell you about Infrascale. Our mission is pretty simple, and it actually mirrors one of the things that David said, that ransomware doesn't just cause downtime, it causes data loss. And funnily enough, our mission at Infrascale, our mission statement, core to everything we do here at this company, is to eradicate downtime and data loss. And ransomware is a modern form of disaster. In fact, we just saw that an enormous percentage of the audience, 37% I think it was, has experienced this particular type of disaster. So here at Infrascale, our mission is to eradicate downtime and data loss. We're doing it with the cloud and clever software. I'm going to talk about how we do that in the second half of my presentation. My presentation looks a bit like this. We're going to talk briefly about sort of the evolution of ransomware. I'll skip through that because David did an excellent job of sort of teeing that up. And if 37% of you have been hit by it, you know exactly how ransomware works. Then I'm going to talk about prevention best practices. After that, I'll talk about how to recover from an attack. And today you're going to hear from three vendors with three different approaches to doing this. You've got us, we're sort of a cloud-based BDR vendor. You've got Zerto, who's doing sort of high availability and replication. And you've got Unitrends, who are doing appliance-based BDR. All three different solutions, all great solutions. So we'll stick around. You'll learn about those other offerings after this. And then we do the Q&A and prize giveaway. Now, Actual Tech Media is giving away the Amazon gift cards. But here at Infrascale, we always give away a toy at the webinars we do. So we generally let the winner choose their toy, Xbox One, Apple TV, or a Parrot drone. And it's for the person who asks the most questions. Now, because we've only got 5 minutes of Q&A today, we thought we would do it based on sending an email to team@infrascale.com. So we're going to send an email out announcing the winner at 5 p.m. today, Pacific time. So during the presentation, type some questions, email them in, and the person who asks the most questions about my presentation wins their choice of the Xbox, the Apple TV, or the Parrot drone. So with that, let's dive in. So let's talk first about the evolution of ransomware. David's already given you some statistics, but here's a few more, some of which are pretty scary. So in Q1 of 2016, not only were 2,900 different variants of ransomware detected, but 72% of ransomware victims were unable to access their data for 2 days, which is an enormous amount of downtime. And this third one, which horrifies me, $209 million was paid out in ransom in the first quarter of Q1, and it's growing. So if you extrapolate that, ransomware has become roughly $1 billion industry for the bad guys who are behind this whole thing. 34% of the SMBs who were attacked by ransomware fell prey to phishing attacks, and we'll talk about that as a very common attack vector here in a minute. So if we talk about the evolution of ransomware, funnily enough, this is actually not a super new thing, right? So if you go all the way back to like the 70s, there were actually attacks like the creeper virus that were designed to disable systems. And it's only recently, though, that this has really taken off. And so why? Why is all of a sudden this concept of sort of kidnapping your data or systems so prevalent? In my opinion, there are three things that have occurred recently, right? The first was the development of high-speed asymmetric encryption that was so strong that it was almost impossible to brute force to get your data back, right? And so that encryption has been really useful in lots of areas, but it's actually enabled these ransomware attackers. The second, and probably the most important development, was the rise of anonymous digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ether. Because if you go back to the 70s, or if you go back to previous ransomware attacks, the bad guys always had this challenge. How do they get the money from you without getting caught? That was always where law enforcement focused, follow the money. With the rise of these digital anonymous currencies like Bitcoin, all of a sudden the bad guys could demand payment in a way that could not be traced. And then more recently, the development of anonymous networking like Tor and the Onion network has allowed even more sophisticated attacks to be developed. And so these three things have sort of propelled the ransomware wave to the current state. And there's been some recent, very alarming developments in the industry. The first is that ransomware is now a worldwide phenomenon, right? Attacks are occurring in every country in the world, and they're coming from every country in the world. It's once upon a time you could block IP ranges coming from, say, Russia if you determined that that was a common attack vector. You can't do that anymore. The second one is that ransomware, sort of the bad guys, have started to target businesses. Early on, the targeting was relatively indiscriminate. They go after anybody, right? So David's buddy with the photos for $500, that's what they do. Today, the attackers are very sophisticated. So the attack at the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, which cost them $17,000, that was deliberately targeted at them because they knew that the hospital had to pay to get their network back up online. Later on, we're going to hear a case study of ours where the specificity of the attack was crazy. They did a phishing attack which mimicked one of the photocopiers inside the network for this university, and they had all the syntax correct and everything. So it nearly had to have been an inside job, or they've infiltrated it, mapped the network, and then did a very specific and careful attack. So the level of sophistication of the attacks are going way up. And then the third thing, which is very bothersome, is that ransomware now isn't just attacking a single node, right, encrypting the files on my computer. It's starting to reach out and encrypt data that's sitting on the network. So what's bad about that is that, most of our organizations are set up so that, Joe, the user, has a shared network drive on the file server. Well, with certain strains like Locky, it will then seek out that NAS and other accessible locations on the LAN and go out and start encrypting those. So now one user affected can take down your entire organization's file server. So these developments, are really disconcerting. And so, am I infected? For those of you who have experienced this, you know what to look for. But I mean, the guidelines are that, if all of a sudden your users or you can't access files that have historically been available, the most obvious one is if you get the window pop up that says, hey, we've got your files, we've encrypted them, email this link to proceed. Another variant on this is that sometimes the programs will then put a countdown clock on the payment of the ransom. And if you don't pay quickly enough, they'll increase the ransom demand, which is kind of nefarious. And then another thing to look for is the existence of all these sort of new files or text files, for example, how to decrypt files.txt. But this is what you're probably familiar with, right? And a few additional comments on these sort of ransomware prompts. The ransoms have escalated, whereas once upon a time it might have been a $300 ransom demand. We here at Infrascale have our customers calling in all the time now, and we're hearing about ransoms in the thousands of dollars really regularly. And another sort of comment here is because so many people are paying the ransoms, it's feeding the entire global industry. When we hear about sort of kidnappers, like literal physical kidnappers in the real world, we don't pay the ransom because if you do that, it encourages more kidnapping. That's kind of the national security stance. Well, this is happening with ransomware because so many businesses did pay the ransom and do pay the ransom. The industry is booming. And believe it or not, many law enforcement agencies have actually recommended that businesses pay the ransom. The FBI, a special agent of the FBI recently said that in most cases it's easy to just pay the ransom, and then the FBI recanted that and said, no, don't do it. But many law enforcement agencies around the world have actually said the easiest thing to do is pay the ransom. We at Infrascale don't believe that. So let's first talk about how do you avoid ransomware. And one of the questions that I get asked incredibly commonly is, hey Ken, isn't antivirus protection enough? I mean, if I've got security installed, then the ransomware is not going to get me, right? Well, the truth is no, actually. In 53% of the cases of ransomware included in a particular study, the ransomware got in even with the existence of antivirus on the machine. You ask, well, how is that possible? Well, most AV software packages are signature-based. They have to know about a particular threat. And not only are threats being created at an incredible rate, like 3.5 new threats per second, but you've also had the rise of crypting malware and metamorphic malware, which will change its binary signatures on the fly, making it very difficult for traditional signature-based solutions to catch. And then, of course, users have terrible digital hygiene, and they always will. It doesn't matter how much training you do for your staff. They do things like disable the antivirus because they think it's slowing the computer down. So what you need is a layered approach. And so I like to call it the 1-2 punch of security and backup and DR. You definitely want security to, protect the perimeter and make sure the bad guys don't get in. But if the bad guys do get in and they do take your files, they do encrypt your computer, you need backup and DR so you can either restore files back surgically or roll back entire systems. So Gartner's advice, and frankly every article out there that talks about how to handle ransomware, come to the same conclusion, which is you must have a terrific backup and disaster recovery solution in place that you can use to roll back. So let's move on and actually start to talk about that. What do you do if you've actually been infected, right? If ransomware has gotten in? You've got two options. You can pay the ransom, which, you might get your files back, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And there's been more and more cases of the bad guys actually then not giving you the decryption key. Or if you're sufficiently organized, then you're going to restore your systems and roll back to a point before the infection. So a question on your mind might be, what is Infrascale's role in all this? If your data has been taken, what does Infrascale do? Well, before I answer that, let's be clear. Ransomware is criminal activity, right? This is not, this is felonious activity. These guys are kidnapping your data and extorting you. That's the crime, extortion. And that's why it's called ransomware. It's digital kidnapping. And whilst everybody wants to prevent kidnapping, that's where your security comes in. It does happen. And if someone's been kidnapped, you always hope that there's, a way of getting that person back. So I'm a particular fan of the Taken series of films. And here at Infrascale, we have a particular set of skills. We are the guy you call to get your data back if it has been kidnapped and if you are being demanded to pay a ransom. And do you know how much our customers have paid out in ransom? $0. And every week we get customers calling us in a panic saying they've been attacked, should we pay the ransom? And we can parachute in and get them their data back and get their systems back up and running. How do we do that? Well, here at Infrascale, we guarantee system failover and rollback from any disaster, including ransomware, in 15 minutes or less. Right? 15 minutes, we guarantee to have you back up and running. And we're doing this at a fraction of the cost of our competitors. In fact, we are 1/5, 80% less expensive than SunGuard Availability Services and IBM. So what we're talking about here is sort of high-end enterprise DR and failover at a price point that any business can afford. And before I go any sort of further into that solution, I just want to zoom out a little bit and talk about what I call the data value pyramid. In any given organization, there are typically 4 buckets of data. You've got your endpoints, which are dispersed and very vulnerable. Then you've got your remote offices and your branch offices. These are sort of your onesie, twosie service things. Think a bank branch. Then you've got your core data center, usually a headquarters. And then you've got your mission critical apps, your ERP, or your CRM, your Oracle applications. Now, here's the weird thing about data protection. That top stuff, the mission critical apps and the core data center, that's usually protected, right? So you've normally got a solution in place that protects that. But remote office, branch office, and endpoints are hardly ever exposed. And so this is one of the things that I think you'll find different about Infrascale compared to some of the other vendors here on the call. We focus on protecting that entire stack. So we've got our Infrascale disaster recovery option for apps and your core data center, and then Infrascale Cloud Backup for remote office, branch office, and endpoint. A total solution with a single pane of glass. So here on this slide, you can see the use cases we support. Push button failover, or DRaaS, this is called, DR as a service, Cloud Backup and Recovery, and then cloud-based data archiving. You see that we do these activities across mobile devices, desktops and laptops, physical servers, and virtual servers. Now, some vendors like Veeam will just focus on a single column. So Veeam just does VMware really, really well. Here at Infrascale, we believe that most organizations have a patchwork of infrastructure. They have hybrid infrastructure. And therefore, we support both physical servers and virtual servers. Within physical, we support Windows, Unix, and Linux. And within virtual, we support both major hypervisors, VMware and Hyper-V. So no matter what sort of stack you've got across, those 4 pools of data, we can protect you. In terms of where the data is going to go, you've got a bunch of options. We're born in the cloud, so you can use the Infrascale cloud. We've got 15 data centers around the world. You can use your own private cloud if you have that infrastructure. You can use the major third-party clouds like Amazon or Azure. And then alternatively, you can buy an Infrascale appliance if you want our hardware as well. So with that background, let's turn to what do I do if I get infected? And it's a pretty simple 3-step process. I think you'll find this consistent among all the vendors. Step 1, get the machine off the network so it can't infect others. Step 2, figure out when you were infected. Now this is really, really key. A lot of people just talk about recovering your data, but that's only half the game, right? Because you can recover back to last Wednesday, and guess what? The ransomware is already there. Some of these variants will infect your network and sit there for weeks or months working slowly. And so it's a real stab in the dark to figure out when do I roll back to. And just giving you a solution that lets you roll back, well, I mean, a lot of vendors can do that. But one of the toughest things is figuring out when you were infected. Once you've done that, of course, you roll back to that point in time. And so here at Infrascale, we've always had security as a first-class feature of the company. That's why we've been partnered with the likes of Malwarebytes and AVG. And so what we've done is built into our solution the ability to detect when the ransomware got into your network, right? So with Infrascale's anomaly detection, what it's actually going to do is intelligently monitor the data payload, and it's doing this at a file system level, and it can work with multiple different file systems. And it will then figure out when you've had a substantial change in the data payload that's going up to the cloud that looks like or resembles a ransomware attack. And our algorithms are getting smarter and smarter over time as we see more and more of these. What this allows us to do is say, hey, buddy, you've got a problem, right? There's something going on in your network. It could very well be ransomware. And so this is built into our central management and dashboard, which you're seeing here on the screen. And so you can see here this alert, anomaly detected. Vastly more than average number of files which have been changed on a system. That is a first-class symptom of ransomware. So in this video, Derek's gone and downloaded the log so we can analyze it and actually figure out what's going on, and now he can remediate. Now the beautiful thing about this is now I know when I need to roll back to, and that is half the battle. So if I have already figured out when I need to go back to, what do I do? Oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on. My computer's just spontaneously started playing share. And I was dead $20 to do that, everybody. So this is what we need to do. We need to turn back time in the immortal words of that great performer. So what I've got here is 2 screenshots, right? The first screenshot is of me looking at my particular personal backup set this morning and looking at different checkpoints. And you can see here I can roll back to pretty much any time in June if I like. And by the way, there are multiple checkpoints a day, so I can roll back to all sorts of different checkpoint times within each day. But I want to show you something that is really, really cool, and I think something that maybe only we do. We have this thing called Forever Save, and it's built into our system. What it means is that we keep an unlimited version history of all of the changes in your systems. And we do that on our dime. So you pay for protected space. And even if that, so you might say buy a terabyte from us. And that might grow to be 5 terabytes to be stored. But we pay for that and we store an unlimited history. So because I founded the company, I can roll back my data to a really long time ago. Here's a second screenshot from my computer showing some checkpoints in May 2012. And I had another screenshot that went back to 2010, right? So this is really important. 2 things here that are different about us. One, we're going to help you detect when the attack got in and when ransomware got into your network. 2, we're going to let you recover back to any point in time. And that is so important because a lot of BDR vendors will keep 2 weeks of history or 4 weeks of history. But the infection may predate that, right? And so if you've aged out of their protection period, then you're in real trouble. All right, so let's talk about the road to recovery. If we think about the olden days, right, and the olden days are right now with a lot of vendors, what happens when a disaster hits? Well, it's 2 a.m. in the morning and it's Saturday morning after a big night out on Friday night. And by the way, these things always happen at 2 in the morning for some reason. You get the call, so you get out of bed, you put your boots on, you jump in your car, you drive to a data center and you start copying data between systems and doing recoveries that take a whole lot of time. And maybe hours later or days later, you get those systems back up and running, right? And you can call your boss and say, hey, we're back online. Well, let's talk about a better way to handle that. End users are working away, and then 2 a.m., boom, system goes down, ransomware is taken down, the Active Directory control, the Exchange server, the whole network, right? So no productivity. So what you do is you reach over and you grab your iPad and you log into the Infrascale portal and you find the office that's been affected and you hit the play button. And that kicks off a whole run book with orchestration that's going to boot all of the different servers in the right order, do the re-IP addressing, change DNS records, and ultimately get your users back up and working. And it's going to do that in 15 minutes or less, guaranteed. And so, Ken, that's great. I mean, you've given us a pretty little animation here, but there's nothing like seeing it. So my second video here is a video of us actually recovering an Exchange server. Now, a few things to note. In this video, we're only going to see me cloud booting one server, but I could do this for up to 200 servers in parallel, right? So we've got terrific orchestration that lets you set up boot sequencing and boot groups. And so this video is going to be quite quick, but you're going to, so let's kick it off here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the office that's affected, and I can see all the different servers that are being protected or application groups if I've set that up. And I want to go over here to the Cloud Boot tab, because what I'm trying to do here is bring up a server in the cloud. So it's my Exchange server that's dead. I'm going to click on that guy and click Boot. And now this is talking to the Infrascale Cloud operating system. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to pick the checkpoint I want to roll back to, right? So I'll pick the latest one. And then I'm going to set up networking. I'm going to talk a lot more about networking on the next slide, but there's a whole variety of ways that you can interconnect your existing infrastructure into the Infrascale cloud. In this case, I'm just going to do it real simply, RDP and SSH. So then I'm going to put in an email address for notification. This would normally be a DList, obviously, and then click Finish. And so this is working away in the background to spin up this machine in the cloud and give you access to it. Now, we guarantee 15 minutes, but let's have a look at how long this takes, right? So now I'm going to RDP into this server. Okay, I got an Active Directory prompt, so something's working. I've logged in. And there you have it. I'm into Server Manager of that Windows machine. So you saw how quick that was, right? So we guarantee 15 minutes, but it's usually a 1 or 2 minute operation. And like I said before, we can do this for up to 200 machines in parallel. So I'm here pinging Google just to make sure I've got outbound network activity as well. And so there you saw me in about 90 seconds, without getting out of bed, I brought the server back up, right? And so here are some other questions that I often get asked. What source environments do you support? So just to reiterate, we cover endpoints, workstations, laptops, physical servers, and virtual servers. Most commonly, we're protecting Windows, Linux, VMware, or Hyper-V environments. How secure is it? Well, it's got end-to-end double-blind encryption. We cannot see your data. Additionally, we can set up site-to-site VPN, so you don't need to use the public internet. We can set up Direct Connect. We can even set up MPLS. What's the SLA? I've sort of hit this point a few times, but it's a 15-minute failover guarantee. What's the scope of failover, and is there orchestration? Well, you can recover back a file or a version or a disk or a folder. But you know what's way cooler than recovering data? Recovering a running computer or a group of running computers or a whole application or an entire office. And that's what we allow you to do. Up to 200 machines in a boot group can be run. What else do I need to buy? With us, absolutely nothing. Okay, so here's the problem with a lot of BDR vendors. They'll sell you one piece of the puzzle, but you have to go and get another server and put it in a second location. You have to have a second location, right? Or they'll sell you, a solution that sort of doesn't include all of the pieces you need. With us, simple subscription fee, $149 per month per terabyte, and it just gives you everything you need: the hardware, the software, the network, and the data center. And that includes all of the on-premise technology as well as the cloud technology. What does it cost? Well, because we're using the cloud and because it's all software defined and because there isn't a requirement to have reserved infrastructure, we're incredibly affordable. Our mission is to bring high-end BDR and high-end failover to the masses. So like I mentioned earlier, we are only 20% of the cost of a SunGuard-based solution, right, which is amazing. And we're doing this using the cloud. We're doing this using clever software instead of dumb hardware and the reserved infrastructure pattern. All right, so now I think we've got a poll here that I'm going to launch. Bear with me while I figure out how to do that. Okay, so this poll asks the question: when it comes to backup and disaster recovery, which one of these is you? A, I can confidently roll back to a previous backup anytime. I'm not worried about it. B, gee, I wish I could do that in 15 minutes, but I don't think I can afford it. C, you know what, bud? I still don't think I'm going to be affected by ransomware. If you're C, by the way, you're in the wrong webinar. Okay, we've only had 33% of your vote. So put down your coffee, reach forward, click a button. We've got 51% voted. Let's see if we can get it up to 60. Oh, it's slowing down. 57, 58, 59, 60% have voted. All right, let's call it there. I think we've got our answer, and I'm sharing the results. Check it out. So only 33% of you can confidently roll back to a given point in time, right? 64% of you, geez, you wish you could do that, but you can't afford it. Well, here's the great news. You can afford Infrascale, right? So you should get in touch with us. All right, so let's bang on. Let me tell you a tale of two cities, or a tale of two universities. This was actually mentioned earlier. Earlier this year, the University of Calgary got whacked by ransomware. Major research center, there was actually a professor whose entire life's work was kidnapped. So they paid the ransom, $16,000, right? But it was cheaper for them to pay $16,000 to get that research back than to lose a professor's life work. Now, guess what? The University of Calgary is not an Infrascale customer. But just a month later, the University of Virginia got hit by ransomware when an employee inadvertently clicked on an email attachment that had been tailored to their photocopier, right? You know, you get these emails that says, you know, Xerox at building 3, you know, at universityofvirginia.org. So this was a really sophisticated attack. But Ellen McCree, the system analyst over there, who is an Infrascale customer, she didn't pay the ransom. And you know what? She never even considered paying the ransom because she knew that she could roll back. How did she know it? Because she tested it. Well, how did she test it? Testing's a pain in the butt, right? It doesn't have to be. With our playbooks, you can easily fail over to a test network with just the click of a button. So Ellen was incredibly confident. She initiated the failover. She notified the staff involved. Total downtime was 1.5 hours. Hey, Ken, 1.5 hours isn't 15 minutes. So what gives with that? Well, the answer is Ellen actually wanted to take other measures and she had to consult some people, right? So that delay wasn't with us. But still, 1.5 hours, fantastic. Ransom paid, $0. Compare that to the poor guy at the University of Calgary, $16,000. And so, Ken, this is all very good, but you know, who are you doing this for? The answer is a lot of people, right? So we've got 50,000 business customers around the world. This map actually shows businesses protected by us globally, 15 data centers, 900 partners, more than 1 million devices protected. And because of this story and because of the fact that we guarantee our failover and our rollback and because of our security, we're a Gartner visionary. So last year we were Gartner's cool vendor for business continuity and disaster recovery. And then this year we were in the Magic Quadrant for the very first time. And I'm told that landing at the top of the visionary quadrant in your very first time in the magic quadrant is kind of a big deal. So we're going to do the Q&A now, I think, David. So back to you, but just a reminder, everybody, Actual Tech Media's got their giveaway, we've got our giveaway, and the way you can win is send an email to team@infrascale.com, and the guy or gal who asked the most questions about my presentation wins one of these doodads. And so, David, back to you.
Yeah, great presentation, Ken. Thanks so much. I want to point out to the audience out there that you can download, the handout from Infrascale there in your GoToWebinar control panel. You can also ask your question there as well. So now it's time for questions with Ken. So we got a lot of good questions here coming in. One of the first questions is, and I think you answered this in the presentation. Stan asks, should we ever pay the ransom?
Well, look, I mean, if you're not adequately protected, sure, you should pay the ransom. If you're one of our customers, absolutely not. But, frankly, with many BDR vendors, you will actually have to pay the ransom. The sad truth is that many solutions out there on the market just won't protect you from this kind of a threat vector.
Okay. They ask here, would whitelisting be enough to stop ransomware? I assume that's email or firewall whitelisting, maybe?
Yeah, it could be, or it could be IP address range blacklisting or whitelisting, and the answer is no. Maybe 2 years ago, but not now. The attacks are just too sophisticated.
Okay. And where do you see ransomware going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Oh, I think we're going to see an acceleration of the business attack trend, right? So we're starting to get really sniper-targeted phishing attacks that are going after businesses who they know can pay. It's no accident that hospitals and banks. These are people that have to be up, and these are people who will pay. Right.
Yeah, good point. What about operating system specific? Do you see ransomware happening only to Windows, for example, or open to all?
It's far more common on Windows. And so here's the thing, right? Everybody in data protection, everyone thinks about the top of that data value pyramid. Everyone thinks about the data center. They're like, oh, I'm hardened in the data center. Guess what? These attacks don't come into the data center. They come into the endpoint, right? They come into the Windows laptop. I was reading last night that the Metropolitan Police Department of London, with 30,000 desktops, is running Windows XP, which hasn't had a security patch since 2014. 30,000 cops running XP, right? So those guys are just naked and exposed when it comes to ransomware. And frankly, most of you all on this call are, because sure, you're running Linux and Unix and in your data center, and it's hardened and it's protected, but that's not where these guys are coming in. They're coming in on the endpoints, which are often running Windows, and Windows is by far the most vulnerable operating system.
Great point, yeah. Another question here is about this person saying there's some ransomware that's been able to encrypt people's backup data. How does Infrascale deal with that or protect from those attacks?
Great point. And so this comes back to our unlimited retention. So, with us, you'll always be able to roll back to a checkpoint prior to the attack. So even if the attack did encrypt, your Dropbox account or your other cloud backup solution, that isn't going to affect us. You'll always be able to roll back to the day before, or in the immortal words of Cher, turn back time.
Got it, yeah. A question here is about, can you roll back different points in time based on the nature of the infection? For example, the volume that my database files is on is clean, but the configuration directory is infected. Can this be automated?
Yes, it can. And so the resolution of recovery for us is anything from an application cluster or site down to a disk or a folder or a file or a single version of a file, right? So no matter how surgical you need to be with your recovery, you can do that through our interface.
Okay. Another question is, can ransomware affect targets such as SQL and Exchange databases?
Yes, and more, they are deliberately going after that, right? They'll hit the MDF, they'll hit your transaction logs. So these B2B versions of ransomware know the sorts of files to attack to disable systems. They're getting really clever, and it's really terrifying.
Yeah, great point. I mean, they're not just going after some person's laptop because they know that's not going to get them a very high ransom. They're going to go after the Exchange and SQL databases, the production critical data that they can charge a really high ransom for.
Well, they used to be, but that's what's changed, right? So 3-4 years ago, there wasn't This wasn't like an economy. This is now $1 billion industry, right? So this is $1 billion criminal industry. And with that much money at stake, you betcha they're getting clever. Hacking didn't used to be monetized, right? So, let's just say I've got a friend who was a hacker when he was a teenager. It was about being like a graffiti artist. It was like defacing a website, right? It was sort of a nuisance. Now it's $1 billion industry where anybody with a little bit of skill can be raking in thousands of dollars. So it's because of that booming economic incentive that there has been such a proliferation of attacks, so many more people involved in performing the attacks, and really clever R&D that's going into building this ransomware that knows where to get you that is the most painful.
Absolutely, yeah. Vincent is asking here, does Infrascale cover cloud-based as well as VMware virtual machines in addition to local hosts?
Yes, all of those things.
Okay. In the video that you showed, what type of internet connection do they have, or how do they know what type of internet connection they'll need to adequately back up and then recover their data?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of networking options. In the video I showed, I just used public internet. So any computer with public internet could do what I showed. In the real world, though, we recommend setting up site-to-site VPN into our data center network, and we walk you through that. That's easy. Or if you've got an MPLS ring among your offices, then you can get a handoff from your MPLS network into ours. So there's a variety of these things. If you're on Amazon, then we can help you set up Amazon Direct Connect. Obviously, private networking is better than public internet, but you can do this over public internet.
Got it. This person's asking about the pricing structure that you quoted. Is that in conjunction with a backup solution or additional costs?
No, that is everything. Nothing hidden, right? That is the on-premise equipment that you need. You drop a little Infrascale blade into your rack. That is all of the software you need to protect all of the operating systems I talked about. That is the back-end data center and all the infrastructure that needs to run there. That's the entire solution, right? It's incredibly simple, cloud-based company. It's SaaS pricing. So this is a bit silly, but I look at what Mark Benioff did for the CRM industry. In the year 2000, CRM solutions cost $1 million. They were sold to you by a pinstripe suit-wearing consultant. Took 6 months to implement, and at the end of it, you hated it. And that is the state of disaster recovery today. Solutions cost hundreds of thousands, are super complicated, and they don't deliver what you actually need. So we're doing what Salesforce did for CRM. We're delivering it via the cloud with simple monthly pricing, completely transparent. We can have you up and running in 24 hours.
Awesome. Another question here is about the data backup interval. So at what point in time, how often can they protect their data? Every hour, every X number of minutes?
It's totally configurable. You can roll that resolution down to every minute if you want. Most people do 5 minutes or 15 minutes. Depends on the payload that you're protecting.
Okay. Can you tie... They're asking about, can you tie OneDrive accounts for business with Office 365? I don't know what that's referring to.
Yeah, can you restate the question?
Let's skip that one, and you can answer it
okay.
after the event. What about backup and deduplication and compression?
Yeah, so Infrascale's actually got a few patents around deduplication. We have our own operating system and file system called DDFS. What that allows us to do is do 3-stage dedupe on the source system, then at our aggregation point on-prem, and then out in the cloud. This will usually yield about a 90% reduction in binary payload. So that's a very fancy way of saying lots of dedupe and compression.
Okay. What's the best way to get started with your product?
Email team@infrascale.com and ask some questions. Win yourself a Parrot drone, which are freaking awesome, by the way. And then we will connect you with somebody in your region. We've got people all around the world and all around America, also in Canada. And so, we'll get you set up with an evaluation and a trial, and we'd really love to talk to you.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more questions here, Ken, but I think that's probably all the time we have, and that's a great point to end on right there. So with that, I really appreciate you being on today, Ken.
Oh, look, mate, thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here. We love working with you guys. Should I pop that last poll now, or do you do that?
Let's go ahead and bring that up. Actually, I'll do that, Ken. It was,
okay.
Yeah. Would you like to learn more about Infrascale's backup and disaster recovery solutions? And so while that's on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and start selecting a prize winner. It looks like Ken has lots of questions to get back to here after the event. I appreciate everyone who took the time to ask such great questions. We got a lot of good questions from the audience. And with most of you voting out there, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And then I'm going to take back presentation control from you, Ken. Again, thanks so much for being on the event today. Really great to have you. We enjoy working with you all as well. So,
cheers, mate. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken.